Hey, David Bristol here with an episode of Breaking Chords, and this is Paul Gilbert style arpeggios. And that was Paul Gilbert's nearly famous Taco Bell's Canon in D, which was his variation of Pachelbel's Canon in D. And this lesson is going to look at some, very famous and kind of common string skipping arpeggio ideas that pop up in Paul Gilbert's music. And this goes all the way back to his Racer X days. So I've been a big fan and kind of a student behind the scenes of Paul Gilbert ever since I was in high school. His instructional videos, his articles and lessons in the magazines, and then just random stuff that pops up online. And I love Paul Gilbert. His sense of humor is quirky and kind of random, and his music is always really inspiring and interesting. He has this nice blend of classical ideas with a lot of 70s and 80s rock and shred too. So you'll hear, Vivaldi and Bach and stuff like that. But then you'll also catch like Ace Frehley licks and Van Halen and Yngwie and all sorts of stuff. So here we go. I've already featured Paul in a few episodes of Three for All, and I kind of broke down, his solo he did with Mr. Big back in the 90s. But this lesson's really just going to be an overview of his approach to string skipping arpeggios. We're also going to tap into a few, like variations or adaptations that he made coming from keyboard and violin too. So it's not just a guitar thing. You can steal and borrow ideas from other instruments too with this. And so the first step here, we're just going to do an overview of string skipping. What it is, why we're doing it, and then how you can start doing it too. So I'm going to put this in the key of D minor to start with. And then we'll kind of move around. And by the time we hit, Taco Bell's Canon in D, I'm going to save that for the end. So stick around and we'll learn, what started the video. But to start here, just think of D minor and just think of a traditional D minor arpeggio. So we're going to have D, F, and A. So that's more or less kind of a sweep shape or a traditional shape, where you have technically one note per string until you hit that F there on the 13th fret. So that's a traditional arpeggio. You catch, Malmsteen and a ton of guitarists playing shapes like that. But Gilbert, he basically relocated this A on the 10th fret on the B to the 14th fret on the G. So now we're string skipping over the B string to create this. Same arpeggio. Just played and phrased in a totally different way. Now we're using more hammer-ons and pull-offs than we were sweeping or picking with the pick hand. So it has a much more kind of flowing legato sound compared to that kind of blurry sweep sound. And I really like the sound of that arpeggio. So you can see we're basically approaching the same thing two different ways, and you can sequence and mix the notes around using that string skipping arpeggio a lot easier than you could if you were sweeping it across the strings in a more traditional way. And I think that's the big appeal to string skipping, is you can sequence and change the notes and the direction you're playing like that. With sweeping, you have to kind of prepare, and it's always kind of awkward when you have to change directions or turn around, like in the middle of a phrase or a lick. But with string skipping, you can make it a lot smoother. One of Gilbert's favorite things to do is he relates, a lot of what he plays to the minor pentatonic scale. Not all the time, but sometimes. And here we can basically take a minor pentatonic phrase in D and then convert that to an arpeggio, something like this. So that minor pentatonic phrase should be pretty comfortable for most people. But if we incorporate the string skipping aspect and kind of maintain that same contour, it looks like this. So it's a little trickier than the pentatonic phrase, but you can kind of feel how it's a similar, pattern of notes or a sequence. Once you lock into that minor key, you can change it to major really easy. We're just going to raise the third. So now Fs are going to become F sharps, and now you're going to have this. arpeggio, and here it is string skipped. That big change in tonality, is pretty important because you definitely need to know the minor version, but then you also need to know the major version too. We start to relate these ideas to actual music and chord progressions and start doing something with it other than just playing, one arpeggio up and down in one key, which, that's a good place to start. But the next thing you should do is explore, your possibilities. And one thing that Gilbert's done, historically a lot is he's kind of adapted, ideas from other instruments, piano or violin to the guitar. And that's really interesting, when you see something played one way on one instrument and then you kind of convert it and bring it over to another instrument. It's really interesting. So there's a couple, kind of common examples that he's thrown around for years, like Point of No Return by Kansas, like the violin lick during the chorus. It's basically arpeggios, and it's moving from B flat to C to F. And you're basically doing this. And there you're basically doing a little piece of B flat major, a little piece of C major, and a little piece of F major. Something like that. And you could also string skip that, and you could relocate, that F note over to the G string, and you could also relocate this G note over to the G string right there. And when it goes to F, you're going to need to, revert to that A right there on the B string. But you could totally string skip that. But I kind of prefer that finger roll version myself. Just a little bit easier, and it seems kind of awkward to shift over there and grab that note on the G. You can do it. It's just a little awkward. Another example of him doing this, I've seen him take like the keyboard lick. It's kind of the reprise during Roundabout, and this is actually Rick Wakeman on organ. But you can adapt that arpeggio to the guitar, and this would be like a B minor over F sharp. And we're doing this. And it's a B minor arpeggio. F sharp's, functioning as the lowest note. But we're also doing a finger roll up on the top there on the 19th fret. And that's between that F sharp and B note up there. So slowly. It's a weird lick. It's very stretchy, for one thing. Now that you've seen a couple basic shapes and also related this to actual music, little excerpts from Kansas and Yes, let's just take a really common, progression that everybody out there should already kind of know, and we'll apply it to, a 1-4-5. So let's start with a 1-4-5 progression in D minor. So that would basically be D minor, G minor, and then also A minor. So we got something like this. And we've got D minor, and G minor, back to D minor, and then A minor. So we just kind of ran through that very common, progression. And I was kind of doing like a 1-4-1-5 just to kind of flesh out, the sound of that progression. Now if we take that progression and play a minor 1, a major 4, and then eventually, a minor 5, that's going to imply Dorian, and that's going to look and sound like this. Twist to it. Of course, we can change all those arpeggios to major, and that's going to create, D major, G major, and A major. And that's going to sound kind of boring and kind of vanilla flavored, compared to some of these exotic sounds we've already tapped into. But a 1-4-5 in a major key would look like this. start changing that around. So now let's take a major 1 and play a minor 4, G minor, and then a major 1, and then also A major or a major 5. So we're only going to alter that 4 chord to G minor. Now you can hear this in classical, you can hear it in jazz, and we're basically doing a chord substitution. Normally it would be G major, but we're substituting to G minor. And like I said, you can hear this in classical and jazz, but check out the song Creep by Radiohead. You'll hear a major 4, substitute to a minor 4. Right in the middle of that song. Now I got this major 1, minor 4, major 5 progression. Just a slight variation, what we've been playing with. And you can continue, changing this. You can start adding different chords. You can go to the 2 or the 3 or the 6 or whatever. It doesn't have to be a 1, 4, 5. But I wanted to show how simple and easy it is to lock into one area and then start making these little variations and alterations to what you're playing. And Paul Gilbert does this all the time. As promised, we're also going to break down Taco Bell's Canon in D, which is Gilbert's variation of Pachelbel's Canon in D. And Canon in D has a very famous chord progression. There's D major, A, B minor, F sharp minor, G to D, and then G to A. And it basically just revolves and cycles around that progression. And that chord progression has been used in hundreds of pop tunes and rock songs and a bunch of stuff. But what we're going to do is apply that progression to string skipping arpeggios, which is what Paul Gilbert did. And let's slow things down a little bit for this. That's going to be D major. And then you're going to go up A major. And then come down B minor. And then go up F sharp minor. And then there's your G. There's your D major. And then G. And then A. So if you put all that together slowly, you can start, jacking up the tempo and the speed, and you can start shredding through that. But that's a really good study in, taking a chord progression and then adapting it to these string skipped arpeggios. You can see there I actually modulated to C sharp at the end there. That's interesting. Anyway, that's going to wrap this look at some Paul Gilbert string skipping ideas. And I've been a big fan and follower of his music and his ideas and his educational material for a long time, ever since I was in high school. As soon as I noticed him, and then I kind of heard him, talk, and I read some interviews and stuff, and then I realized, like, this guy's a goofball. He's joking around, talking about Godzilla and stuff. And I liked it. I thought, okay, this guy is phenomenal, musician, but he's also really funny too. And just, instantly became a fan. So anyway, leave some feedback and some comments. Please subscribe to Late Night Lessons, and I'll be back before you know it with more content and material. Thank you.